Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. So joining me today is my good friend, Dr. Clint Heacock, the host behind the Mindshift Podcast. Clint is an ex-evangelical former pastor and Bible college teacher who discusses the topics of religious deconstruction, religious nationalism, and dominion theology on Mindshift. So I bet right now, most people are saying, like, why is this gentleman going to be on this podcast? Well, Clint joins us today because his second favorite subject is World War I, folks, right? Super lucky.
Mm-hmm. And my first favorite now.
Oh, yeah. So second favorite subject, and he's an individual. So, and he's coming on to discuss an individual whose books I have not yet had the time to read fully. So I welcome this opportunity to learn more. Today, Clint is going to talk to us about Sir Philip Gibbs, a British war correspondent during the Great War, his life and his experiences. So I'm super excited to dive into the life of Philip Gibbs. Clint, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so glad we met. I don't know how many years ago it was, but I got turned on to your Battle of Verdun podcast. And then I think I must have emailed you because I'm, like you said, I'm a massive World War I buff. I've been into really heavily for 7 or 8, 9, 10 years now. And so that's how we met. And then, of course, what I don't know, about maybe 4 years ago, we met in the Somme. That was one of the best trips 5 years ago.
2018.
So we've had a chance to meet in person and go through some of this historic sites around the Somme. It was a great trip.
Yeah, it was super cool. It was awesome. Clint reached out to me, I think through social media or email, and we just started chatting back and forth, and it was awesome to meet up on the Somme. And what was that beer that we had on the Somme? It was
so good. Tea, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I brought so much beer back from that trip. Me and my sister Valerie went, and every time I went into a store, I would come out with packs and packs of beer. You know, she'd say, "More beer?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Yeah, I mean,
Belgian beer, French beer.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, when we got to the ferry at Dunkirk, it was really funny because we were going back over to Dover, and we stopped at the passport control, and the guy says, "Do you have anything to declare in your car?" I said, "Well, I've got a little bit of beer in the boot, as they call it in this country where I live in the UK." He just opened the back and just shook his head. Just said, "Just go." It was just loaded with beer. So
nice.
That lasted me about 6 months. I just slowly parceled it out.
Of course. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I love a good Belgian beer.
Oh, that's so cool. So I have to. So we got to get a little personal, man, here before we start. So, as you listeners can no doubt tell, Clint has an American accent. He's talking about driving beer back home while he's in France. So that means Clint is living in the UK. Very, very awesome. So, Clint, if you can, like, how did you come to live in the UK, and how did you come to be interested in World War I?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So I came here, it's about 18 years ago now, and I was doing my PhD at the University of Chester. So you mentioned my sort of religious background. I came out of being a pastor in the States. I was a Bible college teacher. I was totally into that religious, fundamentalist Christian kind of scene.
Yep.
In that process of doing my PhD, I sort of deconstructed, as we'd say, walked away from the church and the faith and all that. And that's a lot of what I do on my other podcast. But what got me into World War I was I am an academic. I mean, that's like you. I love history. I've always loved military history. What I should have done, to my chagrin, I realized I should have done a degree in military history. I should be a teacher of military history. That's what I should be doing. But it's too late to change fields now. And so I've had this passion. I love to research things. So what got me into World War I? As you said, I was into military history already. I love reading books and all that. And I got onto what's called the Project Gutenberg website. I think I must have mentioned this to you, but this is something we can talk about maybe later as a resource. But if you go to the Project Gutenberg website, it's called Gutenberg.org. There's a huge list of World War I books on their wars bookshelf. And I just started getting into it because I thought, I don't know that much about World War I. How did it start and sort of the ins and outs of it? This is about 7, 8, 10 years ago. started reading books on Project Gutenberg, and what I discovered was that I found most of the books, they're completely out of print. They're ebooks. You can download them for free, which is brilliant. You don't have to pay for them.
Yeah.
Use them on your Kindle, your iPad, or whatever. But what it is it's books written by soldiers, war correspondents, people who were there. It's not just by historians, just reciting this, that, and the other thing about these battles. It's about people who were there, who lived through these experiences. And that just sucked me in because guys like Philip Gibbs and others, they were there. They lived it. And then I went down to the Somme in 2016 for the 100th year of the Battle of the Somme. And that's what I did. I went to some of these places that I'd been reading about, and I have them all on my iPad. And what I like to do is find these places. And then while I'm there, I read the account of that person who was there during the war. And that just makes it intensely personal. So that's why I'm very passionate about it. I love doing that. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, that's amazing. For the Gutenberg site, if you're able to find these books that are long since out of print, you're talking about books that were written probably during the war itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just after it, so the memories were fresh. So you're really like stepping back into that time and capturing those memories of those guys as they wrote them down, like just shortly after they happened. So that's amazing.
Well, it's fresh, isn't it? And the thing is, there's a couple other things about the Gutenberg site. One is it's multiple theaters of war. A lot of it's obviously the Western Front, but if you want to talk about Gallipoli or even African campaigns, things that happened in various other theaters, there are books on that. People who were fought in Gallipoli, fought in Africa, fought in other places, and it's like you said, it's intensely personal. People who wrote during the war, and so it just brings it home because it's not just dry history. It makes it intensely personal, I think. So that I would highly recommend going on that Project Gutenberg site because it's free downloads. You can just get the books, put it on your Kindle, your iPad, whatever, and I've got it right there at my fingertips.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And for listeners, that Clint's reading passages of books, reading poems, perhaps one of the most moving experiences we had was in 2018. We visited the Devonshire Trench Cemetery on the Somme, which is, I think it has one of the more powerful statements right at the gate. The Devonshires held this trench, and the Devonshires hold it still, because all the men of that unit were basically buried in their own lines. But while we were there, Clint read Captain William Noel Hodgson's poem Before Action that he had written 1 or 2 days before the 1st of July, 1916, when the Devonshires attacked on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, and Captain Hodgson, as well as many of his men, were killed just probably within meters of where we were standing. So it just that was a very, very moving experience. So really, really cool, Clint. Awesome.
It really is. I remember too, another one. I've also got that part of that poem tattooed on my arm. I've got like a World War I tribute sleeve. So I've got part of not the whole Hodgson's poem tattooed on my arm. I've got a picture of me standing there with my World War I sleeve in front of his grave, But the other thing I remember, we went to Albert, and there's a cemetery there, and I had read a book by a Canadian chaplain whose son was killed in the Battle of the Somme in 1916, and we found his grave. And there's an incredible story about how his father found his son's body in no man's land based on the ring that he had on his finger. In the middle of the night, they went out in no man's land and located his son's body by his hand sticking up where it had been just kind of hastily buried. And then he was reburied near Albert. And we read the story of how he found his son's body. I mean, just, you can't make this stuff up. It's absolutely incredible. It's a link to the past. It's so vibrant. That's why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that I remember that as well. That was at, I want to say that was like Bapaume Road Cemetery, or
something like that. Bapaume Post Cemetery, something like that, just outside Albert.
Yeah.
But you can put a name to a face and a person. There's a real story there. It's not just another, grave in a line of graves. It's a personal story. There's a father and a son. You can say, I feel like I know this person on some level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is amazing. Like Matt Dixon talked about this when we did our little group podcast on Paul Reed's show here last week, about seeing the names on the on these headstones and on the tombstones, and realizing like they're not just names, like they were lives, there were people, there was someone's son, and making that connection. That you see these hundreds and thousands of tombstones, and it just hits you that much harder.
It's true. It's interesting because where I work now, I teach carpentry skills and things like that. Some of my learners are actually from Arrington. And as soon as I said, where are you from? I'm from Arrington. I said, Arrington Pals. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah. So these guys are several generations removed, but the fact that they're from Arrington, everyone from Arrington, they know that story. They know who the Pals were. They know people who were affected by those men who were killed, so it's not even that many generations removed, especially in this country. You're right there because it's all obviously all around us.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing that the younger generation still carries that as well.
Absolutely.
That's really, really heartening to hear. On a lighter note, like, so this is pretty cool. One of my greatest memories and one of my greatest photos of our time on the Psalm is so. Guys,
I know what you're gonna say.
Clint is like, he's a very distinguished gentleman. He's got a long beard. He's your idea of like a heavy metal rocker.
That's true. I do play drums in a heavy metal band, so that does help.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then you're hanging out with myself and my son Lee and my army buddy Chuck, and Chuck is like, I mean, just appearance-wise, is like very much the opposite of Clint. Like
that's
the
true.
Short military hairstyle. The baseball cap, and very like,
yeah,
like very
squared away.
Yeah, squared away looking guy. And not that you're not, but I caught a picture of you guys with the Tietval Memorial behind you, and you and Chuck were having a conversation, man. And I was just like, that was super cool, man. That was really awesome to
right.
get that moment of you guys talking. So
one of my favorite pictures is when all of us posed in front of the is it Mamet or Mamet's, the dragon, the Welsh dragon. That's another one.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, we have those things in common, and that's what I love about going to places like the Psalm, is that you'll meet people from all over the world, but the only reason they're there is because of the war. There's nothing else out there. It's just desolate countryside.
Yeah.
And I love chatting to people. You pull up to a monument or a memorial or a graveyard out in the middle of nowhere, and here's a car. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from so-and-so, and then you just get to chatting, and that's how it works. But now I will say, I know I might not look squared away, but I am a veteran. I spent 8 years in the U.S. Navy. So we do have that in common. So we have, that military background. Oh I just grew my hair out after I got out. I was like, no way, I'm not doing this.
I totally apologize.
No, it's all right. I don't take any offense to it.
And I don't mean
I was squared away once. Yeah, I could show you my ID picture. I had short hair, no facial hair.
And just for the record, Clint is squared away for himself. Now
my girlfriend did. Yeah, she did trim my beard last night, so it helped. It was completely out of control.
And it's magnificent, man. I got it.
Yeah. Actually, I was walking through Wrexham the other day. We were just talking about this. If anyone's seen that show, Welcome to Wrexham, about Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds, who bought the football club in Wrexham. My house is about 10 minutes from there. We were walking through Wrexham, and a stranger walked past me and said, "Great beard, man." And I'm like, yes, now that's what it's all about. So, I got that going for me, Mike. So I don't take any offense to it. And then later I saw him walking down the street. He had a magnificent beard. So I honked and waved. I said, "Great beard, man." He's like, "Yes." So, a beard bro's got to stick together.
Well, I mean, that, but also like it's just spreading kindness, if nothing else, man. Like
spreading the love.
I think that's a sharp beard, bro. Like that's super cool.
Right. It works.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. All right. So before we get into the subject of facial hair, which like I could go on for a while. We are here today to talk about Sir Philip Gibbs. So he is a figure that I'm aware of. I have a couple of his books downloaded, that I've come across in the past, and I just download things, and I'm a digital pack rat, like I will get to at some point. That point has not yet arrived for me. So
maybe it will after today, though.
Yeah, I hope. So Philip Gibbs, what was his early life like? Well, like how did he grow up? Was he wealthy? Did he grow up he obviously grew up very well educated? I'm assuming for his time.
Well, it sounds like he was more home educated. If we look at his background, just looking at that, he was the fifth son. I'm reading off of a website.
Sure.
He was born in London in 1877. He was mainly educated at home by his parents. He was determined to become a writer at 17. He had his first article published in the Daily Chronicle. And so he was a writer. He worked for different newspapers in London, and then obviously became a war correspondent. But he'd gone to the Balkans War, I think in 1913.
Wow.
So he had some experience of being in a war zone before the World War I started. So he was familiar with what it meant to be a war correspondent and to put himself in harm's way.
And before we started recording, you said that, and I'm sure this will come up later on, but that Philip Gibbs could speak French and German as well.
Yes.
In addition to English, of course. So with this, he must have learned this from his parents then.
I think so. Yeah. I don't know when he learned French, but he did spend a lot of time in France. He talks about it in his books before the war started. He used to go on holiday to France. He used to hang out at various cafes in Paris and things like that. So as a reporter, so he knew, I think he spoke French quite fluently. He says his German wasn't great, but he could read German. He could speak it. He had gone to Germany a few times before the war. And so what that allowed him to do, and that we were saying before we hit record, what I think is so brilliant about Philip Gibbs, not only was he an incredible writer, but he would talk to anyone and everyone. So that meant because he could speak French, because he could speak German, he would talk to the French soldiers. He would talk to the French people on the streets of Paris and in little towns all over the Western Front. He could speak with Belgians. And then as German prisoners of war would come back in, he would speak with them. He went into dugouts in 1917, when the Germans retreated, he went straight into the Germans' dugouts and picked up letters and was reading them, that they'd left behind because they retreated so quickly, so that gives him this human touch. That's what I love about Philip Gibbs. He's not just a historian, so to speak, of the war. It was the human side, the cost on the human level, and his views were decidedly liberal. So he was very critical of the generals, the politicians, and he was always, arguing that nobody really wanted this war. The average man on the street, so to speak, the soldiers didn't even hate each other. It was the politicians and generals that started the whole thing, so he's very critical of them.
Yeah, so that was definitely something that I wanted to ask you about. So I'm going to kind of hit you with a two-part question here is, what led him to become an official war reporter? And you kind of you've already talked about him, critical. How, once he was an official war reporter for the BEF, how critical could he be without getting himself into trouble?
Yeah, he couldn't. And that was the thing, is that if we kind of look at the way his career started, like I said, he'd had some experience on a war front in the Balkans in 1913. But when World War I started, he had this premonition that something was about to happen because he'd been to Germany before, and he got this sense that the Germans were not real conducive to, having peace and all that. So he went to Paris on the 29th of July in 1914. So we're talking days, a week or two before the war actually started. He thought, I've just got to get over there. At that point, he was basically a freelance. There wasn't such a thing as an official war correspondent. So for the first probably 2.5, 3 months, he was a freelancer, and he basically went all over the Western Front, wherever he could get to, and he would report. And it was very difficult to travel because, trains were all commandeered by the military. He talks about one time he was sitting on his suitcase in a corridor of a train for 19 hours, just trying to get somewhere. Wow. From A to B sort of thing, because the trains were so unreliable. And then in about probably September, October of 1914, he couldn't get any closer to the front because obviously it was censored. As you say, it was a heavily censored war. You couldn't talk about anything as a war correspondent. So he volunteered as a Belgian on a Belgian Red Cross ambulance crew, which then got him into Belgium. We're talking September, October 1914, when the Germans are just coming through. And I can tell you some stories about that. It's absolutely fascinating. But he was trying as much as he could to get closer and closer to the front. And he did. He got right up when it was being shelled and everything else, as an ambulance on this ambulance crew. So, but then he got arrested in 1915 because he's like flaunting the rules basically. But then he was allowed to come back in 1915 as an official war correspondent. Now, there were only 5 British war correspondents. So he was one of 5. So there wasn't that many overall. So then he He was there for the entire war, and I mean the entire war. He ended up going into Germany with the troops as they occupied Germany. So he saw literally everything pretty much on the Western Front.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. There's nobody else like him, I think, that was there literally from the beginning, literally to the end when they occupied Germany.
Wow. His joining the Belgian ambulance crew, he was literally like a stretcher bearer for a while.
Yeah. And that's the fast I was mentioning. I love to find these places that people have been. So the last time we were there, might have even been the time we met you guys, because we went on up to Belgium after we left the Somme. We spent another 2 or 3 days in Ypres, and we saw Passchendaele and all these great places. I said to Val, one of the places we have to go to is a little Belgian town called Dixmude. And I said, the reason we have to go there is because Philip Gibbs was there when he was an ambulance driver on this crew in 1914. So we found this town of Dixmude, and we sat and had a coffee in front of the town hall, or right to the left of the town hall. And it's all been rebuilt, of course, but it was raised, during the war. And I read that section from his book. I think it's called The Soul of the War, when he talks about in this ambulance, they're coming into Dixmude and the shells are hitting all around. The Germans are bombarding the town because they've been told that there are some wounded Belgian soldiers in the town hall. And he went into the town hall with his crew, went down into the basement and got these Belgian soldiers up out of the basement, put them in the ambulance. And we're again, shells are hitting, tiles are falling off roofs, walls are collapsing, shrapnel bullets. He almost got hit by a shrapnel ball, and he went and picked it up, put it in his pocket as he's having a cigarette. It's just that cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
So we actually there was a wedding going on. That's why we said, we'll have a coffee. We can't get into the town hall. So after we had our coffee and I read that story to Val, we went into the town hall. We went down into the basement, and I said to Val, we are in the exact spot where Philip Gibbs was, where these wounded Belgian soldiers were lying here, right here, where we're standing right now. His ambulance was parked right in front of the town hall, and we are right in that spot. And the funny thing was, there was a local historian, this Belgian historian, who was working in the basement of the town hall at the time when we were there, and he heard us talking, and he said, I hear, what are you talking about? You're obviously talking about the war. And I said, well, we're here because of Philip Gibbs. He said, who's Philip Gibbs? So I said, let me tell you who Philip Gibbs was. Yeah. He was right here in 1914, September, October. And so I took him to Project Gutenberg, showed him where the books were. He was like absolutely blown away. So, another little connection that you make in these places.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's fantastic. Oh my God. As far as like his being critical, what can you talk a little bit about, like what was he critical of, like the heavy casualties, I assume, or like the immense waste of life, or like I assume it's tied to that, but
it was, but like I say, he was quite liberal in his views, but he very much was against the politicians, the generals, which I think was probably a fairly common view, I guess, at the time. But the thing about Gibbs is that, he was, like I say, he was there, he saw the whole thing, and he was just shocked and disgusted by the wastage, the casualties, the damage, the wholesale destruction. He does talk about German atrocities, which something I don't think that gets a lot of press really, but there were definitely documented German atrocities in Belgium, in France, both during the first advance in 1914 and then later on, when they retreated, they were destroying things, and there was a lot of stuff that went on. There were innocent Belgians. A lot of Belgians were killed by the Germans. So he talks about that. So he's very critical of the Germans as well, but the thing of it was, you mentioned the censorship. So when he was a war correspondent, everything had to be run through the government censor. And he was very frustrated by the fact that he couldn't tell, the truth, as it were. So right after the war, 1920, I think it was, he wrote a book called Now It Can Be Told. And that title says it all, doesn't it? Now I can finally tell what I saw, what I lived through. And then he wrote another book called More That Can Be Told, so it was like, that's not enough. I got to write another book after that. And then that's the book you really want to read, I think, if you want to get his true views, as it were, on what he felt about the politicians and the generals, and how he really was an ally for the sort of average common Tommy, the soldier in the trenches, because he really felt for these guys, because he was there with them.
So we have Now It Can Be Told, More That Can Be Told. These were published just after the war ends. What are the books or works that he published during the Great War?
Yeah, so he wrote The Soul of the War. I think that was his first book in 1915. He wrote The Battle of the Somme in 1917. He wrote From Bapaume to Passchendaele in 1918. And in Britain, it's called The Realities of War, which is more that can be told in other parts of the world. That's the title in 1920. He did write some other books, but those are kind of the main ones that you want to head for. The Soul of the War talks about when he was in Paris before the war started. And that is just, it's such a fascinating story because he saw how the average Parisians, they were shocked by the fact that there might even be a war. They were saying, he was walking around the streets of Paris and here's these groups of people, they're shocked and they're saying, why would Germany do this to us? Why, we don't want a war with them. We don't have any quarrel with them. What is going on?
Yeah.
And then he watches the mobilization and he's seeing these tearful, goodbyes of men, telling their wives goodbye. They know they're probably going to go get killed at the front and nobody knows anything because the French government was they had a wall of silence. So as he's trying to get his way closer and closer to the front, the French government is telling everyone, we're winning. We're beating the Germans. What's the problem? We're winning. And he's like, wait a minute, I'm running into Belgian refugees. Now we're running into French refugees. Now we're running into the BEF. Now we're running into French soldiers. We can't be winning because the armies are retreating, not just the civilians. Now the actual army is catching up with us and going backwards, so it's like, no, I don't think we're winning. We wouldn't be retreating if we were, if we were winning. So that was part of his struggle with it. He knew there was this extreme censorship.
Wow. So we got here. So you've already spoken at length about the nature of his war correspondent work. So he was very much, the question I had here for you was, was he just a mouthpiece for the BEF? He most definitely was not.
I think we know by now that was not the case.
Yeah. And again, so like his difference was that he could speak to just pretty much anybody that he encounters. Yeah. You could get a lot of viewpoints, like capturing that viewpoint of like Paris just before the war was declared. And that's probably, that very much contrasts with the image we have of like, Europe was ready to go to war and they couldn't wait for it. And the young men were, like, it'll be over by Christmas. And, obviously I've read enough to know that like that was highly mythologized since
it was
the war.
Well, and for the French, what he talks about in the early days is that what they were so afraid about was they had remembering the Franco-Prussian War, because a lot of those guys had actually fought, the older veterans and stuff, they'd fought in that war in 1870, 1871, and it was a complete debacle on the part of the French, total meltdown and it's total incompetence and failure. And they were thinking, my God, what the same thing could happen here. We don't want to go to war. We're not ready. We're unprepared. It's going to reveal how, unprepared and incompetent our government and our military is. That's why one of the reasons why they were so afraid, and that doesn't always come across. I think, like you said, it was all gung ho and war is a great sport and we're going to go, bash the Hun and come home by Christmas. I mean, some people were thinking that way, but, for the average Frenchman, they didn't want to fight. They weren't cowards, but there's just no point. Why are we doing this? We don't have any quarrel with Germany, and like I say, he was there. He even saw, when Gallieni commandeered all the taxis, for the Battle of the Marne. He saw that. He was in Paris when that happened. There's like 2,000 taxis and he's watching all these guys climbing in these taxis and being ferried to the front. I mean, but to have an eyewitness, who was there, it's just, again, it just gives that human side to the story.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Cool. So he, Gibbs works as a war correspondent throughout the entire war. I mean, how in his day-to-day work, like how close could he get to the front being an official war correspondent?
Well, that's the amazing bit. He got as close as he physically could. I mean, I already told you about, going into Dixmude and other places in Belgium. I mean, the Germans are actually shelling the town and he's getting in there with his ambulance. But I was just reading the other day his Battle of the Somme book, it's a fantastic book because what struck me about it was, day 1, July 1st, day 2, July 2nd, day 3, July 3rd. He was there. He actually went. He knew that the attack was going to start at 7:30 on the 1st of July, and he knew that a few days before. I mean, he said we'd figured out. Obviously, everyone knew there was a big offensive coming because there was all these artillery pieces being trucked forward. You can't hide that too.
Right.
Something big's about to go down. They just didn't know the exact day and time, but he knew the night before. So he went out at about maybe 2-3 in the morning on the night before, because he wanted to see the bombardment, the British bombardment of the German lines for himself. So he was like right in front of the artillery pieces. The shells are flying over his head, and then on the first, the second, he was right there. I don't know where he was exactly, but it was somewhere near Beaumont, Hamel, Thiepval, somewhere in that region of the Somme, which, we've been there on that road. There's a lot of famous monuments there, but he could see the artillery hitting the German trenches. He could see that. He saw men going forward. He was as close to the front as you could physically get without being in a trench, basically. So he was right there.
Wow. And you spoke of him up in Ypres in 1917, like getting into German dugouts even before they had been cleared out, and reading the German letters and everything. Wow. So
he was right there.
He's right in there.
Yeah.
Was he ever injured or I mean, I know he came close in Dixmude, but other than that,
many close. I don't think he ever was. He led a charmed life, I think, that way,
I was about to say, man, that's amazing.
He came close.
He goes through the war. And where is he? Do you know where he was, like on November 11th, 1918?
I don't know where he was then, but like I say, he not long after the armistice was signed, he went right into Germany with I don't remember which regiment it was, but that's an absolutely fascinating story. That alone is probably worth a podcast, just talking about what it was like, because he talks about, the German people were afraid that the British or the Allies were going to commit atrocities, in Germany. And there was all this tension. And then the Allies were afraid that the Germans were going to be like sniping at him from rooftops, and that didn't happen. So there was all this tension and everything. But then when he got into Germany, he's talking to the average person, talking to German soldiers that had come back and were sort of demobilized. So that's another fascinating insight to the war that, again, we probably don't hear that much about because of all the focus on the actual war itself. What was it like to go into Germany with the occupying Allied forces? But he was there again.
Wow, fascinating. Quick aside to listeners, if you want to get an idea of what the immediate post-war time in Germany was like, I mentioned this because Clint, it was you who told me about it at least a couple of times. But everybody knows the book All Quiet on the Western Front. But what a lot of people may not know is the sequel to that book, which is called The Way Back. And,
yes, great book.
And Clint kept messaging me like, have you read this book? Like, dude, you have to read this book. And after a couple of times, I was like, all right, we're doing this. So I got the audio version from my library, and I thank you for staying on me about getting to it, because it's I mean, just like All Quiet on the Western Front, like as soon as I started listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, man, this is Remarque. I know his writing style. Mm-hmm. And it talks about the German troops marching home with the Americans, like in the author's case, the Americans, just a mile or so behind them, but like coming home and the uncertainty, the unstable political situation, but also these guys having to deal with this shattered country, not physically, but the war has very much like ruined Germany, politically, militarily,
economically,
financially, economically, like
everything.
So just them coming home to that. And then that book was also a study in PTSD. Like it was really like, wow, these guys, like I bet a lot of our American veterans and even British and other veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, they could be like, yeah, I know what these guys feel like. I can understand that. So
shell shock, they called it. Yeah, there are some great books. And again, go back to Project Gutenberg. I mean, if people want to understand what the German perspective was during the war, there's two books I could think of. One is by a guy named James W. Gerard, and this is a fascinating book. He was the American ambassador in Berlin from 1913 to 1917.
Oh, wow.
So he lived in Berlin. He met with the Kaiser. He met with obviously the top officials in Germany during the war, because America was officially neutral all those years.
Right.
And so he writes this fascinating book about what it was like to live in Berlin as an American during the bulk of the war. And then, of course, when war was declared, they had to leave the country. There's another book by Princess, I think her name was Princess Blucher or Countess Blucher. She was married to Count Blucher, who, of course, his great-great-grandfather fought Napoleon at Waterloo.
Right.
That's the same Blucher. So he was a German. They lived in England, but when the war broke out, he was forced to go back to Germany, and she went with him. So she wrote a book about what it was like living in Germany during the war as an English person, and then after as well. So again, there's some fascinating books on that sort of perspective that you mentioned from the German side.
All for free on Project Gutenberg.
Yeah. I downloaded them. Gerard's book, it's just a fascinating case study, because he goes into all the details. The thing about Gerard, he was a Supreme Court justice, I think, in New York before the war. So he was like an international lawyer, basically. So a lot of his book goes around with this issues of, every time there was unrestricted U-boat warfare, they would sink a ship with Americans on it, and he would go complain, and they thought that might start the war and, bring America in. And so it's a really fascinating study.
Oh my God, all of these events like that now are, like so far away in the past, and, all available to us here, like for free, like this.
Yeah. Free resources.
Yeah. Magic of the internet, man. Like, how long was Gibbs with the occupation force in Germany?
I don't think it was that long, maybe just a matter of a few months. And that's another fascinating chapter in his life, because after that, he decides, I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to go on holiday. So he went to America. So This is the funny thing. He must have had PTSD, because his first stop was New York City. And he talks about it in this book. It's called Americans at Home and Abroad and How I See Them, or something like that. But that's a fascinating book, because he comes up out of the subway and he's just absolutely overwhelmed. He's been living in Europe for the last 4 years, right in the heart of the war, seeing all these horrific things. He comes up in New York, and there's, high-rise buildings and buses and cars and people whizzing, and it's been completely untouched by the war. And he's completely shocked. He can't deal with that, but he's kind of, bringing himself around. Somebody, though, finds out that he's like, "Are you a British war correspondent? I've heard you were over there. Would you come speak to it was like a Rotarian club or Elks Club tonight and just kind of tell your story?" Off the back of that, he gets another speaking engagement, and another and another and another. He ends up traveling all around America speaking about his experiences in the war for about 5-6 months. So, I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. He was just going to spend a few weeks in New York, and he ends up on a nationwide speaking tour of America, So just another fascinating chapter in the life of Philip Gibbs.
Wow. So if confronted by this question, which you're about to be, is like, why should we continue to read Philip Gibbs today? Like, what can folks like you and me, like researchers, students, like what can we learn from Philip Gibbs's works?
Well, that's what I was saying before, is that the beauty of Philip Gibbs is not only was he an absolutely brilliant writer and author, but he brings that human touch, the human element, because he talks to ordinary people, soldiers, captured prisoners of war, French peasants, Belgian, just the average person on the street, as it were, while they're going through these things. And it just sort of gives the lie to, war is glorious and war is amazing, and I can't wait to go get to, he says that you don't want to be doing that. But he gives that personal side. I remember one of the other little stories is that before in his book, he talks about this. He was in Amiens, which is about maybe 20-25 miles back of Albert, which was kind of the main jumping off point on the Somme, just a few days before the Battle of the Somme. And he went into the cathedral. If you've been to Amiens, there's an incredible medieval cathedral there. And we went through it on that trip in 2016. And he talks about, seeing these soldiers in the cathedral, and they're sort of like getting right with God, as it were, because they know a big offensive is about to come just within days, and they don't know when, but they probably are going to get killed, and he goes into this, how these soldiers are kind of sitting in a pew with their cap in their hands, and they're saying their last prayers, and, kind of getting their things out of the way. And it's very poignant. And we sat in front of the Amiens Cathedral, and I read that passage from Philip Gibbs, and it was just like, goosebumps are running up, and you're like, this is the same spot where he was in 1916.
Yeah.
This is it. And it brings it so home. That's why I would encourage people, if they haven't been to places like that, if you really want to get into the war, that's where you go. You go to places like Amiens and Albert and the Somme, and you find guys like Philip Gibbs. You find a grave that, of a soldier you read about. And that's what makes it personal, I think. And it kind of wipes away the glories of war, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not familiar with Amon Cathedral, but being out in the Meuse region, like I can think of two churches, one at Neuville and another one at La Chalade. Particularly the one at La Chalade, there's a picture of wounded American 77th Division soldiers, and they're, some of them are laying on the pews or like sitting on them, and they're bandaged up. And at La Chalade, it's the same pews there.
Yep.
Like
you're sitting in the same spot.
Yeah, same ones that those soldiers sat in. So it's like, I mean, man, if you want to get a sense of history and like
it just brings it home.
Yeah,
there's so many stories. I mean, another one was when Val and I we went to the Reims Cathedral, and we sat in the back of Reims Cathedral, and I read her a section from a guy named Richard Harding Davis, who was an American war correspondent, and he was there in September of 1914, and he talks about going into the cathedral at Reims, and he saw this monk coming out, and he got him to take him inside, because again, the German shells are hitting and all around him. They go inside the cathedral, and there's like 3 feet of straw. And as they start walking through, he sees all these boots sticking out, and it's all these wounded German soldiers, and there's blood on the floor and everything else. And he hears this crunching under feet, and he digs down through the straw, and he finds these pieces of blue glass, and he realizes it's the old medieval blue glass in the windows that's been blown out by the shells, and it's under this straw, and it's crunching underfoot, And I read that, and the same thing, just this chills. I said to Val, we're sitting in the same exact spot where this happened in 1914. And it's incredible, so that's why you need to read these things and visit these places, because it brings it home. It's more than just a dry, history lesson in some classroom. It's real life history. People live through this stuff, and they've written books to talk about their experiences.
Yeah. And you're speaking of this, when you were visiting Dixmude, and you run into the gentleman who works at the town hall, and he's like, obviously you're here about the war stuff, but like they all know about that too, and many locals in France and Belgium, they can share so many experiences, and they're ready and willing to do so. I mean, it's amazing. Like they get so interested.
It really is. I mean, and it's just one of them funny things. And I remember when we went to Normandy, I know this is World War II, but we went to the American cemetery there, the one where it must be about 3,500 soldiers buried there. And we were there with my father-in-law, who'd always wanted to go to Normandy, and he died a few years ago. So I feel like that was a huge bucket list thing, that we were able to take him to Normandy and see all the landing beaches. But when we were walking through the cemetery, they came over the PA system that they were going to have, like the taps, I think they do it every day.
Yep.
And they said, please come to the front. There's a monument there. So I kind of went up there, and we did the little ceremony. And then they said, all veterans come forward, please. And I thought, I'm a veteran. Yeah, I'm coming forward. Yeah, and I went up, and there was maybe 15, 20 of us that all assembled in front. And this guy, he was French, and he said, thank you for your service. And he said, my grandfather was saved by an American soldier on D-Day. They lived right there in a village, so he said, it's intensely personal to me, so I felt like, wow, I walked away from that experience just really humbled, that I'd served my country, and I could still be proud of that fact that as a veteran, I was there in a spot where so many guys gave their lives up for freedom,
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing.
Incredible story.
Touches on it. It's like a definite side topic here, but my experience in France, I know, like we hear about the French being rude, and that Parisians in particular can be rude. I mean, for those folks, who think that like Parisians can be rude, like I mean, I love my hometown, but like, have you been to Boston, folks? Like,
forget about it. Oh wait, that's New York.
Yeah.
I've been to Boston. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. We're wicked pisses.
Yeah.
But but I mean, my experience has been like in France, like, and this goes pretty much like for anyone everywhere. Like there's nothing like just saying bonjour as best as you can, and they're going to pick up on your American accent right away.
Sure.
But do just
try though,
and a smile, and oh man, that'll get you a lot. And then out in these towns, you just say, hey, I'm in this town. I'm just looking at some of the stuff that happened here during the war, and folks will be like, hey, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I know a guy who does, and you should go see him right now. Yeah. And I mean, in one experience, like we had a gentleman, I remember he told us in French that, I'm sorry, I can't take too long because I have to get back to work. And we're like, of course, we thank you for whatever you can do. And he wound up taking like 2.5 hours with us, showing us around everywhere. Like he was so excited to talk about this stuff. I mean, they're happy and they're readily willing to share this with you. So
it's true. Well, and because of your podcast, we went to Verdun. I thought that we've got to go to Verdun. And it's kind of another kind of story like that, where we were in a hotel and as we were queuing up to get in the front door and the gate and reception, the couple there was 4 people in front of us, 2 men, 2 women. They were from Germany. And so we just, kind of chat with them as you do, whatever. Yeah. Hi, how well, we're here to see Verdun. I said, oh, you're Germans, hey, that's going to be interesting. So we went out and did our thing. Later that night, we came back and the little cafe part in the hotel was closed, but these Germans were sitting there with some bottles of wine. They said, come join us. So I thought, okay, hang on just a minute. I've got some beer that I brought from England. Let me go get it. It's in my room. We'll come down. We stayed for about 4 or 5 hours till about 1 a.m. We had the most incredible conversation about Verdun, about Germany, the German perspective on the war, the British, the American. I mean, so, it's worth going to these places if for no other reason than you meet people like that. It expands your horizons. You make friends. I'm friends on Facebook with them. They live near Frankfurt, and they come down anytime, stay with us. And it's just one of those things, but that would have never happened had we not gone there and made the time to be friendly with people.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. All right. Clint, this has been fascinating, and we should probably finish up. You heading over next summer, man?
Yeah, definitely. Valerie and I, we're going to go do a little bit more around Ypres, Passchendaele. We're going to go to Bruges, see some of those places around there that we didn't get to last time. So yeah, definitely. If you're going to come, we got to meet up again, Mike, and have a good Belgian beer.
Yeah.
Apparently Bruges is the best place for it, so we'll have to see.
Oh, cool. All right. So when we were there this past summer, we had Bruges on the list. We got to Ghent, but we didn't make it to Bruges. Mm-hmm. It's funny, man. When I'm in France, it's all about the vin rouge and as much as I can get.
Yeah.
But as soon as we cross the border into Belgium, it's like, I don't know, man. That a beer would be really nice right about now. So
yes, it would.
So I look forward to that.
Yeah, just making friends. I mean, the guy that we stay with in Ypres, it's like an Airbnb. We stay with him every single time. The last time he took us out to dinner, bought us the whole meal, took us to these incredible places that we would have never, ever known about, introduced us to some great Belgian beer, so it's just expanding your horizons and just having a great time building relationships with people that you would otherwise have never met.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And all because of, our passion here for this
shared obsession.
Yeah, our shared obsession, man. So fantastic. Oh my God, Clint, thank you so much, man, for taking time out of your evening, since you're in the UK. Yeah, and let's do this again. Anything you want to talk about, man, come on in. The door's always open. So fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about some of these other American war correspondents. That might be a fascinating one, going into Antwerp and some of these other places as it's falling. And the beauty of those guys is because they were American, they could go into the German lines. One guy went all the way to Constantinople, and saw he saw Gallipoli from the Turkish side as an American, so I mean, there's some incredible stories that never have seen the light of day. So yeah, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. We'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out. Awesome. Thank you.